Hello everybody and welcome back to another CB Showtunes tutorial. Now today's tutorial we're actually going to be running through a little bit of an example using C# inside Unity. And with this we're going to be learning how to access components inside of the inspector or on a game object just based on what the game object is or the component is. So without further ado, let's get started. Now I guess the best way of actually figuring this out is if we select our main camera right here. This of course is an empty scene. You could see that we have a couple components already on the game object. You could see a transform, you could see a camera, you could see a flare layer, and you could see an audio listener. Now just taking a look at these four different components here, you could always add these to your script. So I pulled up just a brand new script. You can easily create this by just using the same methods that you always would with creating a script. By right clicking inside your project folder, create and C# script. Now to call this object or to call a specific item on this object, first off, we need to decide where the script is going to be located. So if the script is on the game object, then we would have a specific way of calling it. So let's go ahead and act like the script is on the game object. So we want to grab the transform. So we're going to type in transform. Just like that, we now have a variable called transform. Now, just with all variables, we need to give it a name. So we're going to say this is the camera, and we're going to leave it at that. Now, whenever you have this set to a specific game object, or if it's on the game object itself, you don't need to put public or private. It's really up to your discretion if you want to. But say for instance if the script was on another game object, say for instance this one, and we want to control the main camera from this game object, then we'll need to add either a public or we could add a private. Either one works. It just depends on how you want to call it inside the script. So if you want it as a public transform camera, let's go ahead and grab our game object and drag our script on there. It's got to load up real fast. So let's grab our game object again. I'm going to drag that over there. As you can see, we now have camera, or we have our variable called camera, and it's saying it's a transform. So we're now going to be able to drag our main camera onto that. And just like that, we can see now that it is accessing our transform on our main camera. But let's just say we want to make it private. So we're going to put this as private. So we now want to find our camera. So there are several different ways of finding our camera. And this we could do simply by putting, let's just say, let's say camera. So we're going to be calling the variable is equal to GameObject dot find object with tag. Make sure that it is solo or singular, and then we're going to simply put main camera, and just like that, dot get component transform. And now we can be able to find our main camera. So if I select our main camera, check out the tag, it's main camera. And as you can see, we could easily grab our transform off of that. Now we're going to call the first method because it is a whole lot easier throughout the rest of this tutorial. That's just a reference to if you want to find it in another way. We're going to put this as public for now. So as you can see, we easily found one of the components on our game object. So let's try this again. This time we're going to put a public camera, and we're going to call it main camera. And you can call it whatever you want to. I'm just going to be using the same game object to call for every single one of these. And if you actually want to call these the same object, you could actually just call this as a private. So let me just do that again. So we're going to actually call this public game object called camera. Next, we're going to make a private transform called camera pose. And next, we're going to get private camera, call it camera functions. There we go. Then also we want to say, for instance, find our flare layer. So private flare layer, as you can see. And we're going to say camera effects. And lastly, we're going to call our private audio listener. And we're going to say camera audio. And as you can see, we now have called every single one of these different components on our game object. And if we actually added more components onto our game object, we could essentially find all the types of game objects. So if I actually back out, if we wanted to add, say for instance, an effect, we could add an effect. If we wanted to add, say for instance, a layout, we could add a layout. And be able to find the layout and all that just by typing in what it is. So if it's an animator, you could add in the animator right over here, and so on. Now if you notice, we do have these as private. As I explained beforehand, we could put these as public and then drag them into our game object. But for this specifically, since we have one game object, I'm simply going to be calling these from this camera. So we're going to actually find the camera again. So we're going to put camera is equal to GameObject dot find object with tag, singular of course, main camera. And you could also put in the name of the game object and just put find, and it will search for the game object as well. And just like that, we now have our camera. Now if we want to find our camera pose, we're going to say camera pose is equal to camera dot get component, and we're going to put transform. So we're going to put transform. Good. Now we have our camera position. Let's talk about our camera function now. So camera functions is equal to camera dot get component, and let's just say camera. I am not sure if I'm spelling that right now. It just looks weird. Okay, anyway, camera effects is equal to camera dot get component, and we're going to put this flare layer like so. Let's just say now we want to call camera audio is equal to camera dot get component, and we're going to put this as our audio listener. And as you can see, we now have called every single one of these. So whenever we want to be able to grab a specific part or piece on this item, say for instance if we want to mess around with the variables inside our script for our camera, we could actually do that. So we could now go to our void update function, and say for instance we want to find our camera function. So we're going to say camera function inside our update function and all dot, and we can now have access to every single one of these. So if I typed in clear flags, as you could see, we now have that variable. If I type in background color, as you can see, we now have background color. Culling mask, and so on. So in other words, now since we have these variables, we can access them inside our script and adjust them to whatever we want them to be. Alright, I hope this tutorial helped you guys learn a little bit about how to access specific Unity variables. Alright, if this tutorial helped you guys, make sure that you leave a like, subscribe, check some other videos. If you have any questions regarding this video or any other video, make sure that you leave a comment into the comment section below. Also, if you have a video that you're interested in or you want me to make sure that you also leave a comment inside the comment section below, and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Alright, I'll see you guys next time.